Your air conditioner has picked up a new noise, a rattle, or a hiss, or a clunk when it starts up, and you want to know whether that means a $20 part or a whole dead system. So here is the useful way to think about it. An air conditioner is really four machines sharing one cabinet. There are the electrical controls that switch it on and off, the refrigerant loop that actually does the cooling, the fan and the blower that move the air, and the compressor and motors spinning away outside. When one of those four starts to struggle, it makes its own particular kind of sound. So the noise you're hearing points straight at which of the four is in trouble. Most of what they say is cheap to fix, and a surprising amount of it is just normal running that you never paid attention to before. Only four sounds mean shut it down right now, so let me start with those. The first of the four is a loud hiss or a sudden shriek, the kind that startles you if you're standing near the outdoor unit. That's high pressure venting or refrigerant escaping, and running the unit through it can cook the compressor. The second is a hard banging or knocking that's clearly coming from the compressor itself, that heavy cylinder inside the outdoor unit. That's usually a broken part slamming around inside it, and every minute it runs makes the repair bigger. The third is grinding or scraping, metal dragging on metal. That's a fan blade or a bearing tearing itself apart, and it gets worse fast. And the fourth is a sharp crackling or buzzing paired with a burning or hot electrical smell. That one isn't just a repair, it's a fire and a shock risk, so cut the power at the breaker. If you're hearing any of those four, turn it off and call a technician. Everything else on this list you can take your time with. Now to the sounds you can actually diagnose at your own pace, starting with the electrical noises, because those are the most common and usually the cheapest. Most of what talks here lives in one place, the electrical box on the side of the outdoor unit, where the contactor and the capacitor sit. The first electrical sound is clicking, and a single click when the system starts and another when it stops is completely normal. That's just the thermostat and the contactor pulling in, the relay doing its job. What isn't normal is clicking that keeps going, a rapid click every second or so while nothing actually starts up. That's usually the unit trying to fire and failing, and the top suspect is the run capacitor, the barrel-shaped part that stores the surge a motor needs to get moving. A capacitor runs about $15 to $30 for the part. A pitted contactor, the switch it's clicking through, costs about the same. I'll be honest with you though, the capacitor is the likely cause, not a guarantee. I've watched people swap it and still have a dead unit, because the real fault was the wiring or a stuck relay. And sometimes that constant clicking is nothing electrical at all, just a stick or a leaf tapping the fan blade every time it comes around. So look in the fan before you buy a single part. Humming is next, and it splits two ways. A low, steady hum from a unit that's running and cooling fine is just the sound of it working. A loud hum where the fan or the compressor is trying to run but not actually spinning is a different story, and again that points at a dead capacitor. Shut it off before the motor overheats. And a hum that's really more of a rattle is often just a loose panel vibrating, which a single rubber washer under the shroud will usually kill. Buzzing is almost always electrical. The usual culprit is that contactor with worn pitted contacts, and it's a cheap part to swap. But here is the buzzing you take seriously. If it keeps going after you've turned the thermostat off, and it only stops when you cut the breaker, that's a stuck contactor or an electrical fault, and that's an electrician, not a Saturday project. Crackling that doesn't come with a burning smell is usually harmless. On the indoor unit especially, it's just plastic panels expanding and contracting as they change temperature. Tighten the panel screws and it quiets down. Outside, it can be debris in the fan again. The last electrical sound is beeping, and that one isn't a mechanical failure at all. It's your unit trying to tell you something. Usually on a mini split or a window unit, a beep to confirm a remote command, a filter cleaning reminder, or an error code you read off the blinking light against the manual. On some central systems, a repeating beep is the float switch warning you the condensate pan is full. So with beeping, you're reading a message, not chasing a broken part. That covers the electrical side. Now the sounds that come from the refrigerant and the water, which is where people scare themselves the most. Hissing is the one everybody worries about, and sometimes they're right to. A steady hiss, especially one you can hear even with the unit switched off, usually means a refrigerant leak. You'll often see it paired with weak cooling and a layer of ice on the copper lines. Refrigerant sits in a sealed loop, so if it's running low, it's leaking, and refilling it without fixing that leak just buys you the same hiss again in a few months. That part is licensed work, not a home job. The other hiss is louder and comes straight from the compressor, and that's the dangerous one from the short list, pressure venting because the fan quit or the coil is filthy. Then there's the sound people describe as running water or gurgling or bubbling. This is good news most of the time because a lot of it is completely normal, just refrigerant settling through the lines or condensate draining, and it's loudest right when the unit shuts off. When it actually is a problem, it's usually a clogged condensate drain backing up, and you can often clear that yourself by drawing the standing water out of the drain line with a shop vacuum at the outside end, or pouring a cup of vinegar through it. A plugged condensate drain is one of the most common summer service calls there is, and it's about the cheapest thing a technician will ever charge you to fix. Next are the airflow sounds, the high-pitched ones, and this is where the people who actually pull these motors apart for a living keep landing on the same answer, the bearings. Squealing and screeching usually come from a fan motor whose bearings have dried out, or on an older belt-driven unit, a loose belt squealing as it slips. The good news is a squealing fan motor is often still doing its job, just loudly. A few dollars of turbine oil squirted at the motor shaft can quiet it for weeks or months, though the real fix down the line is a new motor. The exception, and it's an important one, is a high-pitched screech coming off the compressor itself. That's the dangerous pressure sound, and it goes right back on the shut-it-off list. A whistle is a little different from a screech. That's almost always restricted airflow, a filthy filter choking the system, a return grill blocked off by furniture, or a coil frozen into a block of ice. Swap the filter, clear whatever's parked in front of the returns, and if the coil is iced, shut the unit off and let it thaw fully before you run it again. That leaves the mechanical sounds, the bangs and rattles from the outdoor unit, and this is where the cheapest fixes of all live. Rattling is the most common of the whole bunch, and it's almost always something loose. The screws on the top grill and the side panels vibrate loose over the years, so grab a nut driver and tighten every one of them. Check for twigs and leaves rattling around inside the cabinet. Look at whether the concrete or plastic pad under the unit has sunk on one side because an unlevel unit rocks and buzzes, and a shim or a paver under the low corner fixes it. And check whether the copper lines are touching the side of the house, because that vibration travels through the whole room and a wrap of foam where they touch stops it. I'll say this much, the single most redneck fix in all of air conditioning is a brick sitting on top of the condenser to stop the shroud from rattling, and it genuinely works. People run that setup for years and don't care how it looks. A rubber washer does the same job cleaner, but the brick is proof the fix doesn't have to be fancy. Scraping is a more serious one. That's metal on metal, a fan blade that's bent and dragging on the housing, or a broken motor mount letting the blade sag into something. Shut it off and look, because every rotation is chewing the blade up. Banging and knocking split the same way clicking did. A loose part flailing or an unbalanced blade is annoying but findable. A hard, heavy bang or knock from the compressor is the serious one from the short list. And a slow knock that only happens as the system heats up or shuts down is often just the metal ductwork expanding, which is harmless. The big one people actually search for is the jet engine sound, that loud roar like a plane on a runway. A lot of the time that's just an aging compressor getting loud while it still cools perfectly fine, and a sound blanket wrapped around the compressor cuts it by up to half. It can also be a fan thrown off balance by debris or a bent blade, or a coil frozen solid and forcing air through ice. The way to tell the fan from the compressor is to cut the power, disconnect the fan's wires, run the unit for a moment, and listen for whether the roar is gone or still there. Now here's the section nobody else seems to cover, and it's the exact thing half the comments under every air conditioner video are still asking. Which of these sounds are just the machine being a machine? The big one is the noise at startup and shutdown. A lot of units, especially ones with a scroll compressor, make a clunk or a brief rattle right when they kick on or shut off. That's high-pressure refrigerant equalizing inside the compressor, and it can even spin the scroll backward for a second on the way down. It sounds alarming, and it's usually nothing at all. If the unit cools fine, leave it alone. The plastic tick and pop from the indoor unit as it warms and cools is normal. The soft gurgle of refrigerant when it shuts off is normal. And if it's a heat pump running in the cold months, that loud rush of air and burst of steam during the defrost cycle is the system melting frost off its own coil, exactly as it was designed to. So here's a real test you can run instead of taking anyone's word for it. Is it still cooling like it should? Is there ice on the copper lines? Does it smell hot or electrical? And is the sound a soft settling clunk, or is it metal grinding and hard banging? Cooling fine, no ice, no burning smell, and a soft settling sound almost always means you're fine. And I'll say this plainly, if a technician stands in your yard and calls a grinding metal on metal sound normal, don't take his word for it, because that one never is. Two quick notes depending on what kind of air conditioner you've got, because the same sound doesn't always mean the same thing. On a window unit, a rattle is very often the window sash itself buzzing in the frame, not the guts of the unit. So wedge the window tight and make sure the unit is sitting level before you assume the worst. And a window unit that thumps only on the hottest afternoons usually has a dirty coil making the compressor strain. On a ductless mini split, most of the sounds people panic over are normal. A whistle from the indoor blower on startup, a gurgle from the lines, a faint whine from the inverter. Beeping is it talking to you. Portable units are just loud by design, so check the exhaust hose seal and the drain and make your peace with the rest. Here's how far apart the sound and the actual fix can sit. A homeowner had a loud helicopter-style whir coming off the indoor air handler and was told it meant a whole new system, around $8,000. The technician who finally opened it up found a drain pan that had rattled loose and was vibrating against the housing, and he tightened it back down in about 10 seconds. The final bill was $140. Same exact noise, and the price gap came down entirely to finding which part was actually making it. So the next time the unit outside starts making a racket, walk over and listen for where the sound is really living before you imagine the worst. A noise from the electrical box is usually a cheap part. A rattle from the panels is usually a loose screw. A clunk on startup from a unit that still blows cold is usually nothing. And the small handful that come with grinding metal, a hard compressor bang, a loud hiss, or a burning smell are the ones that earn a phone call. If you want to knock out the easy ones yourself, the parts worth keeping on hand, a matching run capacitor, a bottle of turbine oil for a squealing motor, and a compressor sound blanket are listed for you below. Track the noise to the part, and it stops being a threat and turns into a job you can actually size up.